Let's look at how to solve polynomial and rational inequalities. So we have some steps here, right? In general form. So that means you have a common denominator and 0 on one side. Locate key numbers, zeros of numerator and denominator. So those would be like your domain restrictions. And then create a number line. And you're going to pick some key numbers. And those would be like your factors. So we'll look at that. And then test some values and figure out which way the inequality will be graphed. So we're going to start with example 1. So let's look at it. First thing is do the general form. X squared plus 4x minus 5 is greater than or equal to 0. Okay, we are going to use this quite a bit. So when we come back to do some key numbers and some test numbers, this is the value that we're going to use, or the equation we're going to use. All right, so when we factor, we can look at what multiplies to get -5, but adds to get 4. And that'd be 5 and -1. So we are going to write this now as x plus 5, x minus 1 is greater than or equal to 0. So then we want our key numbers. So we are going to do x plus 5. We're just going to say equals 0. So then x equals -5. And then we have x minus 1 equals 0. So x equals +1. So whenever we have our number line, these are going to be our key numbers on our number line. So I do want to put where 1 is. 1 and then 5. Okay, these are closed circles on 1 and 5, and there's no domain restriction saying that x can't be those numbers. Now we're going to figure out which way we are going to shade. So this is where we test some points. So I'm going to test some numbers. I'm going to test numbers out here. I'm going to test some numbers between here and test some numbers here. That way I know what the values are. Are they positive or negative? Because what we want is for this equation to be greater than or equal to 0. So we want positive numbers. So let's do our test point. So I'm going to start out, oh, that should be a -5, sorry. Forgot my little negative. Okay, we can start with -6. So I'm going to sub it in here. This is where I'm going to sub it in for my test points. So this is going to be -6 squared minus 4 times 6 minus 5. So let's use the calculator. -6 squared minus 4 times 6 minus 5. And I got 7. So since it's 7, it is positive. So what that tells me is everything on the number line that is below -5, because that was where the -6 was, is going to be positive. Okay, this is going to be helpful. Okay, let's test a number between -5 and 0, or -5 and 1. So I'm going to pick a 0. That's an easy one. I mixed up my negatives there, but it still came out to be 7 because I mixed up 4 and -6. So just to let you know, it is fixed now. Okay, so we plug in 0, so that would end up being 0 squared is 0, plus 4 times 0 is 0, minus 5 is -5, which is a negative number. So what that tells me is everything between -5 and 1 is negative. So I'm going to put little negatives there on my number line. Now we need a test out to the right of 1. So that's above 1. So I'm going to pick 2. So 2 squared plus 4 times 2 minus 5. I'm going to put that in the calculator. And that equals +7. So it is a positive. So everything to the right is going to be positive. So now we look back at our substitution inequality. This x squared plus 4x minus 5 is greater than or equal to 0. So since we are saying it's greater than or equal to 0, we want only positives. So the areas that are positive are what we are going to shade as our solution. Okay, so now we write it in interval notation. So it's going to be negative infinity to -5. Nothing in between -5 and 1 is going to work because, again, we want it to be greater than or equal to 0, and those values aren't. So then that's going to be union with 1 to infinity. Okay. So if we were to write that as a inequality, we would say x is going to be less than or equal to -5, and x is going to be greater than or equal to 1. So those are your inequalities. Okay, now let's go to the next one. All right, this is already solved for 1, so that is good. Let's now look and see what we need to do. I need to, so it says general form, says common denominator and 0 on one side. So we have 0 on one side, but we don't have a common denominator. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply this by x and this by x. So now we have 2 plus 2x squared over x is less than or equal to 0. All right, so since we have less than or equal to 0, then what we want, so like the last one, I put we want positive. So if it's less than or equal to 0, we are going to want negative numbers. So that's going to be helpful. And remember, this is going to be our inequality that we are going to use. So let's solve this out now. So I'm going to, let's see, look at this. This tells me x cannot equal 0. That's one of those domain restrictions. So that's what you want to look for. And now, let's set for the rest of our inequality. I'm going to do equals 0 because I'm just trying to get my key numbers. All right, so -2 on both sides. So 2x squared equals -2, divide by 2. X squared equals -1. Oh, I forgot there's a typo on this one. All right, the typo is this. I want this to be negative from the get-go. Sorry, I forgot about that. Let's change that. It should be negative. So that's going to make our life a little easier. So then we're dividing by a negative, which becomes a positive 1. So that was a typo. It wasn't like any trick or anything. I just forgot that this should have been positive or minus. Okay, so now when we actually take the square root, we get x is plus minus 1. All right, so those are our key numbers. So when we put it on the number line, We have 0 in the middle. We have -1 out here. We have +1 out here. Because this just says the less than, we're going to do open circles. So those are our key numbers. So this is where we do some tests. Okay, so let's see what we want to test. We were going to use this one, the 2 minus 2x squared over x. So I want to try something out here first to see what that would be. So let's do f of -2. So that'd be 2 minus -2 squared over -2. So that'd be 2 minus 4, which is negative, let's see. That'd be 2 minus, oh, I forgot the 2 there. There we go. All right, 2 minus 2, -2 squared over -2. Wait, just put it in the calculator. 2 minus 2, parentheses, -2 squared. So it's -6 divided by -2, which is +3. Okay, so everything out this way is going to be positive. So now we'll do between -1 and 1. So 0 would be an easy one to try. So we're going to do 2 minus 2 times 0 squared over 0. Oh, remember it can't be 0. So that's no solution. So let's do f of 1. So let's not even test that. But that does tell me I'm going to have an open circle there. So go ahead and put that open circle in there. That means 0 is not included. So let's do not 1, I want to do 2. So I'm going to do 2 minus 2 times 2 squared over 2. So 2 minus 2, 2 squared. And that's -6 again over 2, which equals -3. So everything out here is going to be negative. Okay, so we still don't know what everything between here and here is. So it's either going to be positive or negative. But I want to show you something. So let's go to the calculator. And let's go to y equals. And I'm going to put that in the calculator. So alpha y equals to get my fraction. And I'm going to do 2 minus 2x squared over x. So that way I can look at it. Okay, so I'm going to take a screenshot of this so that I can draw on it. So what we have is everything at this point, this is -1, from here over is going to be positive. Okay, and then from here, -1 to 0 is below, so this is negative. And then from 0 to, looks like 1 is going to be positive. And then from 1 to infinity is going to be negative. Okay, so I'm coming up with this because I'm looking at the x values. So the x value from -1 out, the y values are positive. So that's where we get the pluses. Everything from -1 to 0 is below the x-axis, which means it's negative. Then I look at the next section. From 0 to 1 is all above the y-axis, so those are positives. Then from 1 to infinity is going to be below the x-axis, which is negative y values. So see how it alternates? Positive, negative, positive, negative. So we're going to use that on our number line. Go back, click done, and save. Okay, so remember it was positive, negative, positive, negative. So actually, the pattern is going to alternate. So that's going to be helpful for us. So let's look at what we want so we'll know which area to shade. So we want negative. So everything where the negative is going to be where we shade. So then our interval notation is going to be -1 to 0, all in parentheses, union with 1 to infinity. Okay, let's go to the next one. All right, so remember we want it in the general form, so we're going to have x plus 2 squared minus 25 is less than 0. So this is going to be our equation that we sub in, so this is an important equation. And less than 0 means we want negatives. Okay, so let's go ahead and FOIL. So x squared plus 2x make 4x plus 4 minus 25 less than 0. So x squared, oh, forgot the x. No, that's a 4. I was correct. I tried to fix that. So plus 4x minus 21 is less than 0. This might be a good one to use too. We'll see. So let's see what multiplies to get -21 and adds to get 4. So it'd be 7 and 3, but one of them would have to be negative and it's a smaller one. So x plus 7, x minus 3. So then our key numbers are x equals -7 and x equals +3. So let's do our number line. Here's 0. I just like to have 0 on there so I get an idea of where I'm at. Okay. So let's see. Because it's just less than, it's going to be open circles on these key numbers. So now we got to figure out which ones are going to give us negatives that we want. So I'm going to go out here and test a number. I'm going to test -8. So -8 plus 2 squared minus 25. So I'm going to put it in the calculator. -8 plus 2 squared minus 25. That gives me 11. So that means everything out here is going to be positive 11. Well, positive, I guess I should say, not necessarily 11, but positives. All right, let's test in between -7 and 3. According to what we learned a minute ago, it's going to alternate. It's not always true, but usually it is. So let's do 0. So it'd be 2 squared minus 25, right? So 4 minus 25, it's going to be -21, which is a negative number. So because 0 is negative, or not 0, because whenever I plug in x equals 0, the output is -21. So that's going to be negatives in that area. All right, let's do above 3 now. So let's do f of 4. So 4 plus 2 squared minus 25. So it'd be 6 squared, 36 minus 25, which gives us a positive 11. So these are going to be positive. So what we want, remember, is the negatives. So we're going to shade in between -7 and 3 because of that. So our interval notation is -7 to 3 with parentheses. Okay, this is all I'm going to do on Edpuzzle. In class, I will do example 4 or 5 in the in-class problems.